piece of sculpture.
Does it stay out all year?
It's okay, yeah.
And how old is it?
Should be a mark on it. I'm not sure I stamped this one. It's about at least 25 years. No, it's more. It's over 30.
And you,
No, this was all going on when I was 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, something like this. The war came in 39 when I was 2. Various other kind of energies came into the system that disrupted the smooth path to whatever. Various tragedies in the family with the war. My uncle died, which shook my grandmother so much that she never did any more of this, for instance. And there was this little hut at the bottom of their garden, full of all these unfired pots like this, some of which had been decorated, some of which hadn't. That had got, the rain had come through the roof, so they'd all melted, and the whole thing had evaporated, really. But there were these little bits about that I remembered. But I was actually taken to the pottery and met the fella, and was kind of tickled with it, but I never really did it. And the school I went to, Bradford Grammar School, the art there was mostly pencil drawing or painting with poster paint, and very, very little actual making. So we did a bit of clay, but clay came in a bag of powder that you added water to, and it wasn't really very good at all. So I ended up going to art school as a pencil drawer and got attracted to pottery, and well, I had this attraction and went to an evening class, and after 2 terms transferred to doing it properly. But so it lit a spark, but it didn't really ignite till I was nearly 20. Again, there's a lot of things kind of come into it. I started college in the autumn of 1955, and it was an old-fashioned art school with a painting school, a sculpture school, a kind of graphics department and printmaking. There was a textile department, a pottery, a lot of woodwork, and what's now called interior and product design. Basically, it was woodwork department, made furniture. And very good, you know, they were cabinet makers. There was a lettering teacher who did kind of script and, you know, writing letters on parchment and things like that. It was all the old-fashioned crafts. And art was very much pre-Impressionism. You know, maybe they'd mention people like Ruskin Spear and Whistler and the kind of, basically the English tradition up to about 1920 odd. the end of the first term, we were privileged to have a new head of painting. The old head of painting, who was my uncle Francis Holtz, retired. He'd claimed fame by being the portrait artist on the 1922 Everest expedition. So he'd been taken along to pacify the tribes they met on the way by doing these wonderful portraits of the people that they met, which I think exists somewhere. I mean, he was an enormous man. He was about 6'6". But he taught us, classical art. It wasn't modern art at all. And he'd come to the end of his time and artistic. I mean, a lovely book that goes into that lifestyle is Edmund Duval's The Hare with Amber Eyes, which is about a collection of Japanese netskis. But the story is all about the culture of the rich in Europe, in Vienna and Paris and St. Petersburg. The big palaces that were built for the rich,
which
the
needed
bankers,
big
the
statuary, didn't
merchants
it?
and so on.
And it needed big
Well, it's
pieces
an
of
amazing
big
kind
statues.
of culture. I mean, I can't tell you the story. The book to read about it, though, which captured it beautifully, is this book of Edmund Duval, who is a potter. He's a really good English porcelain maker. The unique thing about pottery is that you can carbon date the day it was fired. It's actually locked into the glaze. The glaze actually freezes as it cools. And it holds the actual information. So pottery has for years been used, and even before things like carbon dating, it was used as a record of civilization. And the pottery is a beauty of pottery, and it's always attracted me for this reason, is that it's indelible. Okay, it can be broken in bits, but you can put the bits back together, and you can see exactly the colour it was the day it came out of the firing. It doesn't change. Even an atom bomb probably doesn't change it. It might melt again and refuse, but at the very heart of the atomic fusion and fission, but just short distance outside, it wouldn't harm it at all. Painting upstairs, which you can have a look at, that
Yeah, that's a good
is
one
about
to
the bits
show.
I've collected out of a ploughed field. So that, the farmer had have his china for Sunday, and Sunday a plate got bust, goes thrown out on the midden. The bits, they get thrown out on the land, and there they are in the ploughed field for the next 1,000 years. So you can walk a ploughed field and find bits, and I've done that. And I made a painting about it. So there it is. School it had a charter from Charles II, I think. This big thing was stuck in the library, and it had this ancient old building in the middle of Bradford, top of the church bank. And before the war, they had this big purge to get a new school, so they rousted round and got money together, and all the local people contributed to it, and eventually they built this lovely sandstone. Well, it wasn't lovely, it was rather
It was a bit perfunctory, wasn't it?
it was Gothic, and it was a bit daft really, when there was the potential of modern art around, but this was 1938 or something. But my grandmother was involved in raising money for it, because my grandfather went to that school, my dad and his twin brother went to that school, and my name was put down for it. It was very hard to get in, the day I was born, I think. I mean, that's another story. We'll go into that another day. But she, to raise money, she was artistic. She did a bit of painting, interested in it. But she knew this pottery in Leeds, up on the hillside at Denholm, Soil Hill Pottery. A man up there called Isaac Button, who's really quite famous, made big baking bowls and plant pots and cider jars and cream jugs and I don't know what. But anyway, he set up a system where you could go to the pottery and bring home mug made of red clay, dipped in white clay, so like custard, it'd been dipped in this white clay. It's all dried, and you could scrape through the white and reveal the red, and make all these patterns. Take it back to him and he put some glaze on it and fire it, and you got a nice finished fired pot with whole life. You know, you're the therapist, the psychologist, the mentor. You know, you can't tell them what they are. They tell you, and you encourage and kind of live with them and watch and, you know, point things out they haven't noticed and things like that. The other thing that comes out of this story is the small world of art, the really small world of those of us who are in this. I mean, I remember way back in the maybe 70s, I went to the Royal College to visit their diploma shows every year. You know, they put on this big exhibition, and maybe one or two of our students were there, and we kind of kept up connections with them as to how they were. I met 4 people on one night on one of those openings with whom I'd shared a year or so under the same roof, sharing a flat. Not one of them knew each other, but I knew every one of them and was really close to them because I'd lived with them for a year or more. And, you know, as students back in the old days or whatever, but so suddenly you realise what a small world the art world is, that you know people so closely as that. And they all turn up on one night from different directions. And you find them in the same place. So going back to the story of Phil Orchard, Phil came to us from a college in Birmingham. I'm not sure, Bourneville or somewhere like that. There was a special art college that Birmingham Council set up for gifted artistic school kids. So they did the sixth form in this college. They did their A levels and an O levels in this place, and they concentrated on art. Now, the headmaster of this school was a man called John Swift. Now, John Swift was a very gifted educator. He turned up at several places in my career. I met him, he had something to do with Sheffield College of Art. I think he was head of fine art or something there. I didn't really know him, but, you know, we had connections, not being far away in Leeds, and we visited Sheffield. Anyway, Phil turned up at our place, and we gave, you know, there was no question he would be accepted on the course. He'd applied to various other places and really didn't fancy it, and chimed in on the course we were running, and he loved it. And but even there, he was slightly reclusive. Our studio was on the 6th floor, away from the main fine art studio, but we were most certainly running a fine art practice using ceramic as the medium. It was the very first time that ceramics was being used not just as a craft, but as an imaginative language. But at any rate, the point of the story, 1980 odd, we transferred from being a local art school and it had been transformed as a department of the Polytechnic into this new building where we were up on this 6th floor. Like a big office block basically, but we're halfway up. It was completely wrong to put a ceramics department up there with all the rubbish and dirt that we made with, so we had infinite problems getting heavy materials up there in the lift and everything all day. Having kilns with chimneys, having to go up through the rest of the building, all this kind of thing was rather inefficient, but we managed it and it was really fabulous actually. But right, Phil completely vindicated the kind of gamble we took to take him on as quite a young novice, but obviously gifted. And anyway, in 1980 odd, we'd been in the Polytechnic maybe 7 or 8 years, and I'd been teaching for nearly 20. So I got to the point of saying, well, I want a year off. I could do with a bit of refreshment and study. And by then I'd got involved with psychology and theories of creativity and so on. So I'd been hunting around for a course that would give me a year to do an MA. Anyway, I had 5 goes at it, and for all sorts of reasons I didn't get my year off for 5 years. And in 1985 I eventually made it. And lo and behold, the man who's running the MA Art Education course in Birmingham Polytechnic was Dr. John Swift. And he reminded me that Phil was one of his students. I didn't know, I didn't remember, but suddenly the paths had crossed again, the circle had joined up, and I was in the hands of this absolutely amazing course director. He had made his career out, he'd become PhD doctor of philosophy, but his subject was memory drawing. I'd never heard of it, but evidently art schools back in the 1900s, 1890s, 1900s, partly his own. He was, in a way, you could call him a Zen master. He was very intuitive, very spontaneous, and it was all about bringing spontaneity and personal creativity into the game. But he was backed and inspired by Sir Herbert Reed, who had written a book about the meaning of art and the essence of the need of art as much as we need food. Nutrition of the mind is as important and powerful of being able to explore the visual faculty, the visual memory, the symbolism of images, the beauty of colour, not just nature, but man's invention of the use of colour, and including things like poetry and music. I'm just throwing this in as an issue or an idea or an attitude. I've always had this feeling about the fact that we're very constricted when all we do is talk. We are limited to being able to speak one word at a time or write one word at a time in a string that becomes a sentence and a paragraph in a book. But we've got to do it in that linear way. It is a time process from the beginning of a sentence to the end of it. And I've compared it with how, and it's imaginative kind of construction this, I don't know how true it is, but dolphins are able to make a sound and read the reflected image back and actually see through their sound, you know, they use this radar, bats do it too. And it gradually occurred to me that dolphins probably are able to communicate to each other, not just an image, but a video. So when they make a squeak to a dolphin in a pack, maybe 4 or 5 of them, rounding up a shoal of fish in the ocean in order to kind of get a good meal, one dolphin is able to say to the other dolphin, you know, you go around that side and I'll go around this side. And he's telling the other dolphin the shape he sees from his side of it. And he's telling this other dolphin the whole video of it, you know, so he's making noises that actually come into the other dolphin's mind as a video moving image. Now we've got the faculty of doing that in our imagination, but we can't do it with our words. The nearest we can get is to make poetry. So a poet actually loads a word with images that suddenly burst out of the word when you read it, certainly with another word next to it. And the two words begin to suddenly getting powerful impulses of meaning from very compact, distilled format of a few words on a page, the haiku, the Japanese image. I mean, I always remember one that somebody taught me. In the empty house, there is no sound but that of a smile, stretching. How many words? 17, 20 words. But it's just, you know, it's so loaded that you've got something now that you didn't have until I said it. It's not mine, but, you know, this is some of the things that happen when you make art. And I've always considered art as something to do with the artwork. Is there's two threads here. One is about the performance that the artist himself experiences as he's making his work. That is the kind of act of art making. But there's something else, that art is also a harvest, a bit like a plant grows and nurtures a flower that transforms into a seed, which is a capsule of a whole living organism that can be planted and reproduced. Well, an artwork is not unlike that. It's the byproduct of a human exercise of intelligence and material and involvement in a dialogue, really, more than a dialogue. It's a multi-faceted kind of encounter with material and an image and an idea, or a lot of ideas about the material, ideas about the colour. But at the end of it is this capsule of meaning, not unlike the haiku. An artwork then stands in its own ground, and if it's any good, it brings together things that you wouldn't otherwise have noticed. It actually holds wonder, or an argument, or a kind of question. It is an answer to a few questions. So this is a version of something that I've been thinking about, and it's distilled down to the point where it stands alone. It seems to do what you set out to say, and it works. I mean, I'm looking. Now this is an inside-out teapot. with a picture of a cup, a cube cup, and a teapot.
Are these kind of your most iconic pieces?
This is one of the best pieces I've ever made. This one, and this is the very first piece I made, for which I claim originality, of blue tomato. And I took a pound of tomatoes and cast them. So eventually there were about 400. It was in the days when somebody decided to make multiples. I made 400. And they were sold for about 50 pence. But the trick with this is that it's not a colour change. So people like Oldenburg, who switches the colour of something. But if it was a switch of colour, the green would have changed to orange. So it's still got a green stalk, so it must be a blue tomato that hasn't changed. But the originality is the fact that it was made at the time when there was a change taking place between the sign for danger being red, and in my childhood, red for danger. They used red on brake lights and, flashing lights on aeroplanes and things like that are usually red. But they suddenly started to use blue lights on police cars and fire engines instead of red ones. So red meant, urgent danger. But you realise also that poison bottles used to be blue, made of this same cobalt in the glass. And they used to stain meat blue when it was unfit for human consumption. They used blue dye on horse meat and various. You could still buy it, but you fed it to your dog. You didn't eat it yourself. But so there's this amazing transformation taking place in 1967, I think, when I made this. When you're, I did make a little story about Follow the Plough, which is right back to me being 5 years old. And I lived at the edge of farmland and visited the farm all the time. And I followed the plough in the furrow behind the horses. There were, horses pulling a two-blade plough, 3 horses. I knew the farmer very well, and he tolerated me coming along chatting behind him all the time. But I walked round and round that field, in a sense imbibing this amazing practice that farmers used to do, which would plough fields. And in those days, or before my time, but they cut the grass with a scythe. So it was all done, they virtually stroked the landscape every year, tilling the earth and sowing things into it. Now pottery is not unlike that. Everything I make comes out of holes in the ground. It's just normal rocks of different kinds that are purified and, separated and whatever. But essentially it's like gardening, and there's a job you do preparing clay to make it ready to throw, which is just, we call it wedging. It's like kneading dough. But there's a basic chore which is not unlike the job of tilling earth and getting it ready to grow things in. And you're transforming this basic, ordinary, humble material into eventually things that have got jewel-like properties, transformed with the clay, with the firing and the, putting glazes and things that melt. But they're things that come out of the earth. Like I said, that blue glaze is whitewash, carbonate, call it calcium carbonate, and Cornish stone, which is decomposed granite, and cobalt, that's all it is, and it melts into a glass. Makes that amazing. I did all sorts of things with Murby strips. This is a Murby strip. which is now called Fields and Sky. A continuous wave. I've done quite a few drawings. That's another one, the sunflower. Different track, that's called Two Heads, One Idea. And this is the idea. It's a shared idea. It fits both of them, but in a different way. So the same idea becomes transformed. So you can say it's father and mother. But this is a bit like puppets. I've always been interested in, I've made a lot of things where there are two. Something to do with my Libra nature part. But it's about the fact that these two can relate to each other in different ways. Or the idea can live in its own right, as separate. The knot teapot. This has got a continuous line running from the spout, go down through, and as it goes along it changes colour, becomes yellow and comes out here. And then there's another line that runs around the outside. Goes back inside and comes out here again. They're all different colours and a bit dusty. There's always something different on the back. Found a colour slide in the library of a Chinese horse. I thought I'll have a go at making one of those, so I made a model and cast it. So this was made in a mould. And then I worked out all the different glazes to get it to look like the original. This has been rubbed with earth and I don't know what to get the colour of the outside of the unglazed part of it. But I was a bit foxed because somebody eventually showed me the original, which the slide I'd got had been taken from. The original is in a museum in Glasgow and it's this big. So if I'd known, I would have made a big one, but I thought it was that big. Touching the void piece, I'll tell you a secret, because it was made like that and I picked it up and a bit fell out. I broke it, it was too heavy. So instead of being a Yorkshireman, mean, not the sort of person who lets things go and wasted energy, so I actually cut this square and made a cube, and suddenly something rare happened. I didn't even notice it myself to start with, but your eye puts an edge on that. it's a bit like you blink when somebody hits something with a hammer. You can't stop yourself blinking, and you can't stop yourself wanting that to be flat. Isn't a hole, but that one is, and that isn't, and that isn't. But there are other kinds of holes, this illusion. But you nearly touch them to see if they're real. And then, in the sense this happens, the edge, you know, it overlaps. Now that will come near the light so you can see this a bit better. Words in mirrors go backwards, and it says in the mirror but nothing cuts, and you turn it round. I patented that in 1979 because who would believe that until you see it? Mm-hmm. Flat version of the sculpture downstairs called Double Dovetail. I've done commissions. I did a big one for Leeds Corporation. I made a big column like a big flower or tree trunk. This was the prototype of an English letterbox. It actually says on the little thing there, I don't know if you can read that. Okay, but it's right. We have a cylinder, and virtually most pots are cylinders with the bottom and a hole in the top and a rim. Now, the top, it's got two edges. One edge, two edges, and it's got one surface and two surfaces, so there's the outside surface and inside surface. Now what happens if we put a twist in it? So we're taking the bottom edge and joining it to the top edge, and the top edge is now joined to the bottom edge. So we've now, that is what is called a Möbius strip. So you can follow one edge round and you come back to where you started. So it's now got one edge and one surface. Although it's three-dimensional, it's still only got one surface. Okay? Instead of doing that, we put a twist in one. So we were connecting the outside edge with the inside edge. Okay. So that now has one surface and one edge. That edge goes all the way around. And the sculpture at the bottom of the stairs is made on that principle. We've got a saucer with a hollow in the middle. Gradually that thickens out the saucer, becomes like that. So it's got a hole in the middle and a thickness, a bit like a bagel. Gradually you change it. So that becomes the handle. And you put your finger in the top and make a hollow. So gradually convert it into being a cup. So what started off as a flat surface, maybe with a hole in the middle, but it may be just a flat surface with a circle drawn on it and a top and a bottom. But gradually that becomes a hole. So it transforms. So the cup transforms this way into a saucer, and the saucer transforms this way into a cup. So basically, a saucer and a cup are both the same. Snow pots they had baskets, so they could make a basket, and they'd go to the stream and they'd try to fill it with water, and the water went away. So they get some clay and line the basket. Occasionally, the basket gets into the fire. Some of these, the basket burns off. Suddenly, we've got a vessel made of clay that's been fixed by the fire. It doesn't melt when you put water in it. And it's got all these marks of basket on the outside. So the early Stone Age primitive pots had this weaving drawn on the outside. They didn't know why they did it, because they'd forgotten that it came from baskets. So pots always had drawings of weaving on the outside. That's just one little story. Some of these are part of that. No, the idea of the inside and the outside, and a fictitious hole and a real hole. This is kind of partly real. I call them touching the void, because people always need to check, is it a real hole or is it, and some of them aren't real holes. The nice thing about this silver is it makes it space. So suddenly you've got a spatial experience in the shiny bit. The solid surface disappears. This was smashed, so it's been pieced together. It's like a building in a fictitious space. It becomes coherent in different directions. You can imagine this going through and connecting up to here.
Sure, yeah, that's good.